go through today. So we will go over defining what a database, what we really mean by a database, and also we will learn how to use my Educator website, which is the online book that we will be using in this class. And then we will start with an example of how to run an SQL statement or a select statement, which is a structured query language. So, as we said in the previous video, that in this class we will cover 4 core capabilities that MIS provides to organizations, and those 4 capabilities include storing and retrieving data, and this is the first mod that we will cover, and then analyzing and visualizing data, which is the next module. In that module we will actually learn about Excel and how to analyze data using different techniques in Excel, as well as visualizing using different charts for graphing and visualizing data. And then the third one is automating data, and the fourth one is protecting data, which is security and privacy. So let's focus now. We'll start the first lecture on storing and retrieving data. So the first thing is, what do we really mean by a database? What is meant by a database? So actually we have been using databases every time. So every time you use Facebook, and all the likes, the posts that you have, they are actually stored in database. Every time you log into to Facebook, for example, or any of your social media websites, actually you are logging in and retrieving that data from a database stored somewhere. And also all the contact information that you have in your phone, all of this is actually stored on a database. And when we go to Amazon and buy products, actually we are retrieving, when we search for a product, we are actually running a SQL statement, and we are retrieving data from a database. So, and also when we log into our banking accounts, all that data is stored in a database, and a very secure database. So we retrieve data from there. Again, so this is kind of shows us that everything that we have been using online is actually has a database. So we have been using database for a long time, and we don't even feel that we are using them. So we have been using databases. Again, who needs to understand how databases work? Actually everyone, whether business major or non-business majors, they need to understand how databases work, because a lot of my colleagues and friends who work in different companies, actually they are different majors. Some of them, actually one of my friends was major in theology, and the other one is in sociology, the other one in psychology, and all of them actually have been using SQL to retrieve data from an ERP or enterprise resource planning software, which is a large database for the whole organization. So you need to be able to retrieve that data to make reports, because you will need to prepare reports for your boss, for example. And to do that, you will need to understand how to retrieve data using SQL. So this is what we will be focusing on in this particular module. So let's think about database in terms of an analogy of a pantry, in terms of food. So you can think about data in terms of food. It's like food. If we have food and that is piled up in a disorganized way, you will see that if we want to retrieve one item, and we will need actually disturb and dig in this pile, and we might even actually disturb and destroy or ruin other items while we are searching for them in this pile. So it is not organized, it's not efficient, and it's not effective. So therefore we need to have a better way to organize all those food items in a way that we can retrieve them very quickly and very fast. So to do that, we need to come up with a pantry that has shelves. So using those shelves, we will be able actually to organize every item according to its theme. So if we have, let's say oranges will be in one shelf. So if we need oranges, we can retrieve them easily from their shelf. For example, vegetables in their own area, and fruits in their own area, and so on. So that makes it much easier, much efficient and effective for us to go and grab what we need and take it away really quick without disturbing or damaging anything else. And the same thing for data. You can think about data the same way. If we have data about a customer and data about supplier or data about products, they are all kind of scrambled and piled up in one place. Then if we want to grab one data, let's say one piece of data about a product, then we might actually need to dig it and go through first the product, or actually the customer and the supplier, so it's not very efficient. So what if we have bigger? So now this is how it looks. It looks very organized, and we can find everything in a very neat and nice way. So Pantry is house for food, and you can think about database as house for data. So what about the pantry? If we have larger pantry, like larger food items, so then we can put them in a warehouse, right? Same thing for a database. As an end user, actually for us, as you can see here, the end user interacts with data through an application software. So that application software, we call it also the front end. That application software can be a browser or a form in a browser. So if you remember when you applied for to be admitted to the university at OU, so you went to OU website and you filled out a form. So in that form you put your demographics information and you put your GPA and so on. So you used the browser. So that was actually the application. So you enter data into a database using that browser. So that browser then transforms the data that you entered into, or transports it into database by transforming them into structured query language or SQL. And then it gets into the database, and then in the database you have the actual pieces of data in those database. So again, when we say the database is basically the house for data, like when we say the pantry is the house for food. So again, here is this is kind of an illustration how the end user interacts with the database. We as end users interact with the database through an application software, which is a browser or a website through a browser. And then that connects connects with the database through the structured query language or SQL, which we will be learning about today. So we have been actually running a lot of SQL statements without even knowing that we have been running them, because the application transforms whatever selections we do into SQL, so that way the computer understands it, and that SQL communicates very well with the database management system, so it can retrieve that data that we wanted. So in order to understand SQL, we need to understand the ERD or entity relationship diagram, which is the schema that organizes the tables in a very logical way. And as you can see here, we have different tables, and every table represents an entity or an object. And every object is basically referring to a theme. So for example, the first theme here is customer, and this entity collects attributes about that entity. Those attributes are the customer ID, and then the first name, last name, and so on. So those are what we call them attributes or characteristics of this entity. And as you can see here, we have only one theme, which is the customer. Everything that is related to the customer is in this table. The same thing for sale and manufacturer. So entities, they have attributes that actually describes them, and every entity needs to have a primary key or a key, so that uniquely identifies every record in that table. In this case, the primary key for customer is customer ID. So now another concept that we need to understand is what we call it a foreign key. So every entity or a table, you can say alternatively, every table has a primary key. But when that primary key, in this case here customer ID, when we see it in a different or in a foreign table, then it becomes what we call it a foreign key. So let's look at this one. Customer ID is a primary key in the customer table, but when we use it in another table like the sale table, now customer ID in this table becomes a foreign key. So again, entities and relationships are built through those foreign keys and the common attributes. So every entity has attributes, and I already talked about this in a little bit. Again, here, this is what we mean. This is the primary key, and when we put it in a different table, it becomes a foreign key. So the same thing. Now, you might have noticed that there is a key icon here. So this icon here refers to that this is a primary key. And also the sales ID is a primary key for the sales table. Now you might wonder, what about the sale item table? It has, is that correct? It has 3 keys. Yes, it has 3 keys. So those 3, the combination of those 3 keys actually become a primary key. So the combination of them uniquely identify every record in this table. So again, sale ID is a primary key in the sale table, but in the sale item here it works as part of the primary key, and it is also a foreign key. So we will talk more about this later on, but now what is really important that we understand that we have a primary key that has an I key, that has a key icon to it, and when we use it in a different table, then it becomes a foreign key. All right, so now let's move on. And the first thing that we will learn is how to extract data from a single table. So you might have noticed that you have used maybe Expedia if you went to Cancun or you went on vacations somewhere. You have used the website and you looked up, let's say, flights. And to do that, actually you are searching a database that contains all this data about flights. So you search and you put in your search flying from Oklahoma City. Then actually you are narrowing down what you want to be retrieved by specifying the name of the airport that you want the flights from. So then you also narrow it down by putting where you are flying to, and then you narrow it down even more when you identify the date that you want to depart and the date that you want to return and the type of that particular flight. Again, if you are traveling, and again, if you are planning to buy shoes for, let's say, a female in this case, you will buy shoes and you are going to specify that you are selecting all from the shoes table, and then you will specify in the where you will specify or pinpoint what exactly type of shoes you want based on some criteria. So in this case, the women's size or the size will be 7, and the width will be N, and also the style will be comfort. So now you are kind of narrowing that search. Basically, this is an SQL statement. So we have been using SQL statement for a long time without actually recognizing that. So now we will learn about the structure of SQL. So people sometimes they pronounce it as SQL, some they call it SQL. So whatever way you prefer to use it, that will be fine. All right, so it is kind of SQL, the way we write it is very similar to the natural language. So we instruct the computer to select, and then from that select, we instruct it to select the columns or the fields for us from a particular table, and then we can pinpoint in the where clause. So this is kind of the structure, and it is in this order. So whenever we write a SQL statement, we need to start with a select clause, and then in the select clause we specify the names of the fields or the columns from a table. And then from, we specify the name of the table we want to retrieve that data from. And at a minimum, we need to have, for a select statement to work, we need to have the select and the from clauses at a minimum. So those are the minimum clauses that we need for a SQL statement. So again, for the select, we select here the names of the columns from the table, and then from here we specify the name of the table, and the where, if we want to pinpoint, and let's say when we did the shoes, we said where size equals 7. So here, where size equals 7. So when we want to narrow down our retrieved data, we use the where clause for conditions. And then group by, this is if we have aggregate data, let's say such as sum, minimum, maximum, average, and so on, we can use the group by. And then having also, it comes with group by. And then order by is basically as if we are sorting or ordering our output by a certain column. So let's move on. Also here in terms of processing, the SQL statement gets processed in an order. So the from clause is actually executed first by the computer, then the where clause, the group by third, and so on. So the last one is the order by. So this is helpful to understand this order, especially when we run a long select statement. So again, the order of the select statement is very important. So you can't actually start with from and then select. So it has to go or start with select in the same order. Select first and then from next, and so on. And another thing that we need to understand is that those are not uppercase or lowercase sensitive. So it should not be a problem. But for us, we try to use sometimes all cap, just kind of to help us identify that those are keywords or clauses. So you might see me, for example, sometimes using all small letters, and sometimes we might use capital letters for the keywords, but there is no actually problem. Whether you are using all cap or small letters will be fine. So SQL is not case sensitive. So again, here for every database, we usually have a data dictionary. So the data dictionary is basically a description of the table and its attributes. So in this case, this table is called simplified sales. So that's the name of the table. And then the attributes for this table, they are the sales date and so on, all of those guys here. And the data dictionary here is very helpful because it tells us what we really mean by a sales date. So the data type, we need to understand what is the data type and how it would look like, and the first name and the data type and so on. But you get the idea. So the data dictionary gives us more, or we call it sometimes actually metadata. So metadata refers to data about data. I think that would be a good quiz question or an exam question. So what we mean by metadata? So metadata refers to data about data, and this is exactly what it is. So this is attributes, they are data, and we have here more description data about this data. So I hope that helps explain what we mean by metadata. So this is basically the data dictionary is an example of a metadata. So now we can see that this is the table. The name of the table is simplified sales, and it has columns, and those are the columns and or attributes. And then every row in this table, we call it a row or a record, right? So, or an entity instance. So now let's practice by going actually to My Educator. So let's go to My Educator. So the first step how to get into My Educator is by going to Canvas and then My Educator here. So this is what we will see. All right, so this is what we have. This is how it looks like. So uh, the way you will, after you purchase this book or online book, you will be able actually to navigate through it by going to contents. So the first thing that you will need to do is to read chapter 1. And to read chapter 1, you can just click on this guy, and then just you can either listen to it by clicking on this guy, and then it will read it for you, and you can listen to it, or you can just read it yourself and then go navigate from here one at a time. So I briefly went through some of those concepts here, but I will ask you also to read it to gain more knowledge about it and understand it better. So that's one thing, is the reading. The second thing is the practice. So we will have to practice stuff here. So one way to do it is to go through assessments, but before we go through assessment, I want to do this one. I'll just open it here. So this is what we will have. This is, so again, you can go back and forth how I did that. So what I did is I just went to, in your case it might be different, but at least you will get here the name of the course, and then you can click on Advanced Query Editor, open it in a new tab, and then this is what basically what we have. And Redcat 1, this is actually the table that we have just learned about here. So this is actually the table that we will be working with. So let's say that you want to use SQL. So the first time, let's say that we want to practice and use SQL. So SQL is a language, so we can actually run some calculations with it. So by starting with a select, so select 4 times 4, and then I run this query. So let's see, actually I need to make sure that I select the correct database source. So I need to select the database. In this case will be SQL Server, my Educator, and then the credential in this case will be Redcat 1. All right, so now let's run this guy. So we'll wait for it. If it is slow as like this, then we can actually use the Azure one, which is much faster than this one. So let's use the Azure SQL Server at Azure. Perfect. So now you get the idea. So we will stick to using SQL Server at Azure. It's much faster. It's a cloud-based. So let's say that's what we did. Let's say 5 times 100. So you got the idea. Now we can use it as a calculator. Now let's say that we want to retrieve all the content that is in the simplified table, simplified sales. So what I will do is I will say select, and then I will say let's say select only. We will start maybe with first name and last name, exactly how it is spelled here. So I will select the name of the column, which is in this case the first name and last name. So first name, comma, last name, from. So now I have to put that from, and then simplified sales. So now what I did is I select, and then I specified the name of the column I want to retrieve, and the second column, and then I specified simplified sales, which is the name of the table. So now I will run it, and you will see that my output is returning the first name and last name from this table. So that's one thing. Let's say that I want to add something else. Let's say, what else do I have here? So first name, last name, product name, or category. I will add category. I will just run it. Beautiful. So now you can see. So I can add as many as I want, or all of them. let's say that I want just to retrieve everything, that all the columns that I have in this table. So one nice trick is to use the asterisk key. So I'll put select all. So when I put asterisk, basically I'm telling it select all from simplified sales. So to do that, I can just run it. Boom, beautiful. So now you will see that I have every single record in this table shown for me, and you can see here it is only showing us the first 100 records because we have so many records here. So just for my Educator website is just showing us the first 100. So you got the idea now, and this is actually what I really wanted to cover with you today to get you started, and then we will